Hey everyone, and welcome back to this episode of Love Like Crazy. We're your hosts, Jay and Stacy Coleman, and we're really excited about the topic that we're going to talk about today. But first, I just want to give a shout out to all of our viewers and listeners. We just want to say thank you for joining us on this journey. We're just so glad that you're a part of all of this. And listen, if you are enjoying what you're hearing and you want to share that with some friends and family that you know could also benefit, please do so and comment and like, share, subscribe, and comment and let us know exactly, how you're enjoying this and maybe even other topics that you would like to hear us talk about. So we're going to jump off into this next episode, and it's going to be a topic that everyone is going to want to hear because it is one of the top reasons for divorce. And so we're going to jump in on the topic of money. So honey, let's give them some background to all of the things that maybe we've experienced and learned from.
Dumb, stupid, ignorant. Those are some words to describe us.
Those are the adjectives we're going to jump in with today.
That is honestly how I would describe our early experiences regarding finances.
Yes.
Do you remember that probably one of the dumbest mistakes we ever made going into, I think it was the second year of our marriage.
Okay. Besides the dirt bike story that we've already shared
we've
in
already
another
talked about that.
episode.
We're moving on. But
we don't talk about that anymore.
After I gotten a second job, or I got a promotion, got a really good job, was working in the financial industry, making okay money.
Mm-hmm.
And we made the decision, that was back in the days of big stereo systems. And we had to have a giant stereo system. Remember that?
Oh, yes.
So I went down to a local electronics store, bought this stereo system, the biggest speakers that we could find, and did not pay cash for it. We actually financed it. I think the rate was around 20%.
Oh, it was a lot.
The payment stretched on forever.
Mm-hmm.
And we were so proud of that giant system, took it home and set it up and turned it up to blast the speakers. And what happened?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Then the little lady that lived next door came
Lil,
over.
her name was Lil.
Her name was Lil, and she came over and she started banging on the door and she's like, "You have got to turn that music down." And we were she let the air out of the balloon. We were so excited about this giant stereo system, but it was way too much for the little apartments that we lived in.
Yeah. We had a guy named John living on one side, Lil living on the other side.
Yeah.
And boy, did she
was upset. Yes.
She came over and I don't want to hear that music played that loud again. So that was, we never got to enjoy that stereo system.
No, not at all. Not really.
But the payments, it was kind of crazy because it wasn't long when that first payment comes in and you see it. Then the second one, it's more like a weight around your neck. And a lot of couples fall into that mistake of wanting something and stepping out and purchasing things and being just weighed down with these heavy payments. So we're going to talk a lot about today.
Yes.
Doing things in unity, but making sure that you learn to live within your means.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's so very important. And I look back at that and, these days it's like couples, they just are just people in general, they jump in and they just want the newest, shiniest thing. And these days it's like the newest iPhone, right?
Yep.
Well, back in the day, the stereo system that we bought was like the shiny iPhone.
Yeah, the newest iPhone is going to cost you, $1,000 plus.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that stereo system, we paid about $1,000 for.
Yes, it was a lot of money. And all because, you like you said, you got this new job and things were like, oh, we got this extra money. And so we didn't quite prioritize what was the most important purchases that needed to be made. We just wanted it. And so I think that's where people go wrong, or we have gone wrong before in the past, is that we prioritized more of what we wanted instead of what we needed.
Well, we fell into a trap that a lot of couples do. We raised our standard of living based off of our paycheck instead of really living within our means and enjoying the extra income that we had come in, saving it, putting in retirement. We just went out and made more bills. And a lot of couples fall in that trap. They want stuff, so they get a little bit of an increase, they get a little bit of a raise or a promotion, and they just raise that standard of living.
Right.
And as a result, they go out, make all these purchases, and it really is, they're enslaved because it's just making more bills, and you're constantly having to get more money, more promotions to be able to keep up. And every time you raise your standard of living. So I like to say this, don't raise your standard of living to be equal with your paycheck, but learn to live within your means.
Yeah. And I think everybody probably has a story of like ours. I mean, we've that's not the only, mistake that we made. I'm sure that there were quite a few others, but
Well, I would say that probably one of the telltale signs that we were in for some problems
mhm.
was when we first got married. We were probably about a month out from our wedding date, May 1992. We're sitting there. We're putting a apartment together. We were decorating because I was living in this apartment and you were getting ready to
Yeah.
move in when we got married. And you wanted to be able to make it your apartment. So we're
Yes.
decorating. And I remember one evening we sat down at the table, started talking about finances because
Mhm.
we wanted to go over all of our bills, wanted to
Yes.
discuss everything. And you remember what had happened with my checking account? I had a new checking account. And do you remember what was there with the account?
Right. I started going through the checkbook and realized that you were overdrawn. You had
And
bounced some checks.
now we promised on this podcast we would be real with you guys. And that is, I'll just be honest, that's somewhat embarrassing for me to say that. But I had some checks that had bounced that were outstanding. And my soon to be bride found this
Mhm.
out. And I will tell you that my mom and dad were great. They were great parents. They were financially responsible. They put God first in their finances. But I don't really, I didn't understand how to operate a checkbook, balance budgets, all that kind
Right.
of stuff. So your mom had prepared you a
Yeah.
little bit.
I think I came to the table with a little bit more experience with that. When I was a freshman in high school, my mom decided, and this was basically teaching me how to manage money. She said, I think I want to start giving you a weekly allowance. Now we're talking back in the 80s,
Yeah.
okay? So she said, well, I'm gonna give you $30 a week, but there's stipulations to this allowance. And I do believe I was doing some things around the house, to earn this allowance. And she said, okay, what you're going to do is you're going to take this $30 a week, and part of it is going to be your lunch money. Of course, back in the 80s, lunch at school was 60 cents a day, $3 a week. I mean, it wasn't a whole lot, but she says you're going to pay your lunch money out of this. And then if you want to go to McDonald's with your friends or whatever, then you set aside money to go spend on McDonald's. But then also, because I love to shop and she also loved to shop, but we went to a certain store that we just loved to
Boutique.
go to, a boutique back in the day, I guess you could say. And I found an outfit, a little short set that, shorts and top that
Oh, I
matched.
thought you were going to say you got some new Jabots or Guess
No,
jeans.
no, I didn't step. No, not on $30 a week, honey. No, so she said, what you're going to have to do is if you want that outfit, you have to put it on layaway. Do you remember
I remember
layaway?
layaway.
I mean, I know that is like a foreign term these days. And so I would take a little bit of my money each week and I would go and pay on the layaway until I could get the outfit.
So she was teaching you to learn to live within your means.
Yes, but the most important thing that she taught me with that weekly allowance was that I had to tithe.
Yeah.
And so she was
Put God first.
Put God first. And so I appreciate that. So I had a little bit more experience in money management, or at least making the decision of where I wanted to put this money.
Okay. And quite honestly, my parents were very financially responsible. That they tithed, they were ones who saved. I would watch them pay the bills, but I didn't really have a concept about, balancing budgets, balancing a checkbook, things of that nature. So it's no fault of their own. I was just immature and I was foolish at that time.
But also back in the day, and I don't think it's something that is offered necessarily at school, like in high school. I took a class called consumer math.
Yeah, I think we called it business math. I took that same class and it was great.
And it taught us how to balance a checkbook. But see, there's not that need anymore because people, we use, debit cards now, which that was not something back in the day. And you can just go to your bank app, and it does all the work for you.
Right. So that was a great class, but they would teach you, but you had to learn to put it into practice what they
absolutely.
taught you. Now, carry this into our marriage. So that's where we start. I've got bounce checks. And so at that point, we made the decision that since you were better at bookkeeping than I was, that you became the bookkeeper.
Yes.
And we made a decision that was crucial going into our marriage. Two things. First of all, that we were always going to honor the Lord with our finances. We were going to tithe. And we've been doing that for 30 years now.
Yes.
And I could go into Malachi, I could go into Matthew chapter 23, where Jesus talks about the tithe. it's the only testimony I can give you, and I tell everybody in our church this: it works. When you honor the Lord, put Him first, it works. He takes care of you. It doesn't mean you're gonna have a bank account bursting with cash, but it means that somehow, some way, He gives you the wisdom and stretches things, and
He provides for you.
Exactly. So we made that decision, but we also made the decision that we would operate within our finances as a team, that we'd always handle our finances together. And it doesn't mean that we didn't make foolish decisions. We've told stories in that regard.
We've made a few.
But we made the decision that we're going to operate as a team. So you handled the finances, writing the checks and whatnot, but every month we would go over them together. And so I'm telling you, if you listen to this, you are a married couple, do not have this situation where you're doing your thing and your spouse is doing their thing, but you need to come together as a team. You both need to know exactly what's going on in the finances all the time. Together, there has to be unity there.
And you talked about how we would sit down and go over it together. One of the things that really helps, and I'm sure anyone who listens to Dave Ramsey knows about this, you have to write it down. Like we would write down in a ledger book, what bills were due out of this paycheck, or, if you get paid weekly, you get paid every other week, but to put it down on paper and to see where your money is going is extremely helpful.
Right. Now, a lot of people are going to laugh about that. What do you mean write stuff down? Like I write everything down. I mean, even my notes are handwritten, but maybe you don't want to handwrite stuff. Take out your laptop and make a spreadsheet. Take out your laptop and put some things on paper, or put it at least on a screen where you can see it. So fast forward from there, because we now handle our finances together. As you heard by the stereo story, we made foolish decisions.
Right. We went right into debt, had a payment that we didn't really like.
Right. And I would tell you that probably early on, one of the most foolish decisions that we made was we had a credit card, and it seemed like we were doing the things we wanted to do, and it was kind of stupid stuff. It was like we would go out to eat. We would get a new outfit. We would buy stuff that would quickly fade. And then here we are stuck with this bill.
Right.
And so we would always pick up, I had a couple businesses. I had a vending business. I did pressure washing for a season.
I taught piano lessons.
You taught piano lessons, voice lessons. So we, in addition to and at this point we moved into ministry, and ministry doesn't pay a whole lot. The Lord put that calling on our hearts and lives. So we went into that profession, and we're working in Lafayette, Louisiana as children's pastors. You're a school teacher at the school. And so we're financially, we're trying to make ends meet. So we're doing extra stuff to bring in extra money, but it didn't seem to help, because it seemed like we were always playing catch up.
Exactly. Because we kept using that specific credit card. Yes.
So I'm not a fan of credit cards. And I know that there are people who, you got to get the points. You do this, and credit cards only work in the positive. And there's a lot of financial experts who are going to fuss at me about this. But in my opinion, credit cards only work in one way, in a positive manner, is if you will pay it off every month.
Right.
The problem with that is the average American does not have the discipline, does not have, what it really takes to pay that credit card off every month. And so that's why I'm of the opinion that don't have a credit card. I don't think it's wise. I think too many people, we see something bright and shiny, that new iPhone, we see something bright and shiny, that new watch, and we want to just purchase it. And then you're in the same position like we were, where you're always playing catch up.
Right.
So the way that we began to live several years after our marriage was something that I don't even know where I heard this, Stacy. I don't know if it was it's not original with me, but it's called the 10-10-80 principle.
Yes. Something we've always lived by.
And this is something that I actually teach whenever we do premarital counseling. I teach couples this principle. I've promoted this in our church, because it will teach you to learn to live within your means. And the 10-10-80 principle is this: you take 100, break it down, 10-10-80, add it up, adds to 100. I know some of you are like, we don't know math that well, but the first 10% is that you honor God with your finances.
Absolutely.
You tithe. And that is a decision for you and your spouse to pray about, come in agreement about, because it's something that you need to be in unity about. But we made that decision early on within our marriage that we were always going to honor the Lord in our finances. Yes. And it's just something that's a part of who we are.
Absolutely.
The next 10 is to save. You need to learn to be savers with your finances. And you might say, well, we can't do 10%. Like, well, start somewhere. Start at 1%, start at 5% and build it and grow. I know for us personally, we save a lot more than 10% now, but we had to start
not back
somewhere.
in the day. Right. Yes. I remember that being a harder thing when we first got married, the saving part. I had no problem giving to the Lord first. I had been doing that before we got married. So that was not even a thought not to do that. That is what we did. But the whole part about saving, I had a harder time with that because we had created such debt, foolishly, then it made it harder to save. And so I definitely think that once you make the decision to get out of debt, to lessen those type of bills that you have monthly, it's a whole lot easier to save. But yeah, I remember just even if it was like putting $10 from a paycheck into savings, it was at least disciplining ourselves enough to save something.
Yeah. We can share stories with you guys of foolish decisions that we made. And a lot of people, they say things like a fool and his money are soon parted.
Departed.
The Bible says that a fool and his money are soon parted. Well, that's not what the Bible says. Actually, a lot of people, the book of Proverbs has a lot to say about finances, has a lot to say about being wise and foolish. And a lot of people take that away from Proverbs. I think it's 21:20, where it says the wise store up choice food and olive oil, and a fool or fools gulp theirs down. In other words, they make foolish decisions. They're not ones who will set finances aside. They just see what's in front of them and they gulp it down.
Right.
While the wise are ones who are going to set aside just to have it for a later time. And I would say this is what I get from that. I want to walk in wisdom. I want to be directed by the Lord and not by my immaturity, not by my selfishness, not by my wants. But I want to be wise. Right. So,
and I think too, in those first years of marriage, we were learning the term now is adulting.
Yeah.
We didn't realize that's what it was back then, but we were learning how to be adults. And sometimes we just didn't realize that, we needed to set some money aside because what if there was an emergency? What if the vehicle broke down? What if we had a flat tire and needed to buy a new one? We were then solely dependent on leaning on that credit card, but if we did not have enough cash in reserve. And so it's part of growing up and being an adult.
Right. And it started where we were when we were young. We were trying to set aside enough money to, some financial experts call it an emergency fund, but we always wanted at least $1,000 in an emergency fund, where if we had a flat tire, we could go pay cash for that instead of having to go put it on a credit card. And then from there, we said, okay, we want to be able to start setting aside finances to where if there was a job loss, if there was something that happened that was, over like flat tire emergency, we said, let's set aside 1 month of expenses, not 1 month of like how much you would like to spend in a month, but what are your basic expenses? What is it to pay your rent, your utilities, gas, groceries, and set that aside. And through the years, we built that 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. And here's what I would tell you. I think it's a good rule of thumb. You start with a month, but have at least 3 months of your expenses set aside in a savings account. And it's really good to have 6 months of expenses set aside in a savings account. And it's going to take you some time to get there. Look, this is a marathon. It isn't a sprint. So within your finances, if you're going to be wise, be a saver. Be somebody who's going to set aside money. Now, in our marriage, I would say that we started off this way. You were more the saver. I was more the spender. And we've
we have flipped. We definitely have.
I'm the saver. I don't like spending money. You are, you save, but you're more the spender.
Well, yeah.
You like to shop.
I do like to shop. No, I like to find good sales.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're thrifty.
I can be, yes, I'm thrifty. And I used to do the coupons. I still use coupons and stuff. I love to find things on sale. Yeah.
All right. So with that said, here's, we're talking about 10-10-80. We're talking about learning to live within our means. We talked about always being a team with our finances, being in unity, but we also put another thing in place within several years of our marriage that's held true to today. And we talked about this before, that anytime we would make a major purchase, we would always be in unity. That included things like vehicle, house, washing machine, things of that nature, appliances, gun.
Oh, yes, a gun.
If we were to make a purchase, and we set a dollar amount on that. We set it back in the day, it was $50, but now it's about $300. that we're always going to talk about that. We're always going to be in unity about those major financial decisions that we make.
Right.
Because I honestly think that that is what causes a lot of division within marriages whenever you have couples who are just running off, buying all these things and the other spouse doesn't know about it.
Right.
And then when the bills come due, it causes a lot of fights, causes a lot of issues.
Right. And there's just no sense in keeping secrets like that. It causes way too many problems in your marriage. And so that's the lack of communication, which is also one of the top reasons.
That's always cited as the top reason.
Yeah, reason for divorce. And so now, communication is so important in every area, but especially your finances, because otherwise they're going to be fighting all the time.
Right. And don't take that for granted that you've been together. Well, we've been together for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. I shared in a previous episode that I tested the system and I went and bought a gun without letting you know. And I had to repent, had to apologize to you. And, you called me out on it and you were okay with it. But I realized, like, no matter how long we've been married, if we're going to maintain these principles within our marriage, we've got to be open and honest and transparent. We got to communicate constantly. And the things that have built our marriage, we want to continue those things within our marriage.
Right.
So unity is key. So 10-10-80.
10-10-80.
Tithe, save the 80. The 80 is learning to live within, I like to say it like this, learn to live within the 80. The average American does not live at 80% of their annual or monthly income. There's a recent report that came out that 63% of Americans at right now this report came out 2022 with the rising inflation, the wages, being down somewhat. The average American, 63% are living paycheck to paycheck. And so a lot of people would say, well, we'll just make more money. I'll take more overtime. I'll work a second job. And this one kind of surprised me a little bit, that those making six figures, 49% of them are living paycheck to paycheck. So I'm an advocate for making more money, working harder, making a little bit extra money, but more money is not necessarily going to solve your problem.
Right. No, it's not always the solution.
Learning to live within your means is what solves the problem. And so say no to all those wants and learn to live within your means. And sit down, write out with your spouse a monthly budget. What does it look like for us to live on a monthly basis? And all the things that, and this is going to be hard, but all the things that your kids want, some of those things you're going to have to say no to. I get it.
Our poor kids, I think they just the only thing I ever said was no. No, we cannot get that. No, we cannot.
Well, and I think the reason for this is because they see all their friends and they would see all the new toys. They would hear about all the things that they get to do. And I don't think that our kids went without. We always went on vacations. They talk about, with the different things that we purchased for them, but we also made them work for stuff that they wanted.
That's right. So if they had something that they were wanting to purchase, and I think of the example of our oldest one is a musician, and so he had an acoustic guitar that he wanted to buy, and we said, okay, if you save up half, we will pay the other half.
And that translated to the other things that he wanted, as well as the other things that the other two wanted as well. You're going to work for mom and dad are not just going to give these things to you. You're going to work for this. And so you're going to earn the money. You're going to have some skin in the game. And I think that that's a wonderful thing to teach your kids. Another thing is this. I don't think that there's anything wrong with requiring your kids to have a job after a certain age. Even at age like 12, 13, my parents were letting me, like help with the neighbors, raking up grass clippings, cutting grass, stuff like that. And then my first job I got, I think whenever I was around 15, I worked at a ranch one summer and had the time of my life. Hard work, but boy, I had the time of my life. And then several other jobs throughout high school, always looking to make myself. I don't think that there's anything wrong with not just teaching our kids to work, but you need to tell them, hey, you're going to get a job. You're going to help with your car insurance. You're going to pay for your gas.
Right.
They need to have some skin in the game. This whole business of just giving our kids everything, it does not lead to a healthy life for them down the road. It's not helping them with work ethic. It's not helping them with learning to manage their resources that they have. And so I'm all for teaching our kids to work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They appreciate things more whenever they have to work for it.
And I think for me personally, for my sons, it was teaching them how to be a man and how to provide for their family down the road as well.
Exactly.
So 10-10-80 principle. Tithe, save, learn to live within the 80. Don't make it paycheck to paycheck. Now, somebody listening to this might say, okay, well, look, we're in a bind right now. We got a lot of debt. Inflation's rising. Cost of goods are rising. I go to the grocery store and, a dozen eggs. Goodness gracious, there's my retirement account I'm spending right there on eggs and milk. But I think that probably for us, we recognized when we got to this place where we had debt, we don't want to be in debt anymore.
No.
So we began to work our way out. You want to talk to them about the debt snowball?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So yeah, you write out your bills, what it is that you're in debt, and you take the one with the highest interest first, and you start paying that off. And then once you get that one, you add whatever that payment was to the next.
Yeah, don't celebrate like we got this bill paid off. Let's go buy something.
Yeah, no, you keep going until you get all of your extra debt paid for.
Somebody might say, well, okay, we're strapped paycheck to paycheck. How do we? That's where the extra money comes in. If you want to work overtime, if you want to pick up a side job, and let's just say you make an extra $100 or $500 a month, you take that and you put it on that bill and you begin to pay it off.
Yes.
Once you pay that off, you take what you're paying on that and put it with the next one and pay that off.
I can remember when our kids were little, I was teaching piano lessons. Yeah. That was an extra income for us. But I remember there being a couple of months, we got very serious about this debt snowball. We were going to get everything paid off. And we had a credit card bill that I remember after tithing off of what I made from teaching piano students, I took like a huge chunk every month and went to pay until that credit card was paid off.
And it was hard because that's what
discipline.
We're talking
took a lot
about,
of discipline.
We're talking about learning, like we're having to play catch up. And it was hard to take that money that we could have went and had fun with.
Done so much more with.
We started paying that. But here's what happened. Once we paid all that debt off, we were actually able to start looking at purchasing our first home.
Saving it.
And starting to save money. And it allowed us eventually, when we moved here to Baton Rouge, it allowed us to say yes to you being a stay-at-home mom.
Yes.
It was in your heart to be a stay-at-home mom. And when we moved here, you said, I don't want to teach piano lessons anymore. I don't want to give voice lessons anymore. I just want to stay at home, focus on the family, and help you with the church.
Right.
And that's what we did. Now, we lived a very simple lifestyle because we're accustomed to a 2-income home here in America, but we lived a very simple life. And it allowed us to spend a lot of time with the boys, take them to school, pick them up, do different things with them. And being out of debt and living that simple life was a wonderful thing for us.
Yeah, and I don't regret it at all.
No.
I loved every bit of being with my kids.
Yeah. And now here we are at this place to where we have a couple of bills. And look, there are some things, some of the financial experts will fuss at me. You're probably going to have a mortgage. I know for us, we had times where we had our vehicles paid for, but it's probably, prudent. It's probably, something you look at and say it's wise. You're going to have a car payment as well, because you need a reliable vehicle to get back and forth to work. I think where it came to it for us, it was like, okay, the repair bills are starting to, get to where, this is ridiculous. And so we said, okay, let's buy a reliable vehicle. And so we purchased a semi new vehicle. That's a nice talk for Hughes. We always put you in the nicer vehicle, and I drove the one that was paid for and wasn't the nicest vehicle. But you're probably going to have a mortgage. You're probably going to have a vehicle payment, and then from there, my opinion, you want to have as little debt as possible.
Yes.
If no debt, no debt at all. And we tried to live as debt free as possible. And a lot of times, especially in where we are in our culture, a lot of people look at we're a couple in there, like we're empty nesters,
right.
We're early 50s. And a lot of times people look at where we are and they say, well, I want to be there now. It's like, well, you're 22.
Yeah.
It took us, 25 years to get to where we are, 30 years to where we are. And it was, remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So work to get there. So I know for us, I could take you in a lot of places in Scripture, Matthew 23. I could take you to the book of Proverbs, and we could look at financial passages. We could look at Micah, but the reality is the Bible has a lot to say about finances, and it always couples it in two ways: foolishness or being wise. And so we want to be as wise as possible with our finances.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you have anything else you want to add?
Just be in unity, pray together, and make good decisions.
Yeah. So learn to live within your means, be in unity with one another, say no to credit cards, quit raising your standard of living, and live within your means, live a simple life.
Yes.
10-10-80 principle. And be, as Proverbs tells us, be the one who is wise with your resources, the finances that the Lord puts in your hands. Don't be like the fool who just gulps everything down, but always be in unity together. And trust me, this will lead to a place where your family is healthy, your marriage is healthy, and you won't be fussing and squabbling and fighting all the time.
That's right.
So I know we've thrown a lot of information at you guys today. And as Stacy said earlier in this podcast, if you are liking what you hear, like this podcast, share this podcast, subscribe, and help us to get the word out. Help us to build this podcast. And we appreciate you guys so much tuning in and being a part of Love Like Crazy. We're so excited about being able to do this adventure, and we thank you so much for taking this journey with us. As always, I'm Jay.
And I'm Stacy.
And we thank you so much for being a part of Love Like Crazy.